You know, I had a moment this morning while I was waiting for the light to change. I was just staring up at that green metal rectangle on the corner, reading the name. It's something I've probably looked at 1,000 times, typed into my GPS, written on envelopes, but I realized I've never actually read it. It occurred to me that we are constantly navigating through this web of words that we just accept as fact.
It is the ultimate background noise of civilization, isn't it?
Yeah.
We treat street names purely as functional tools, data points to get us from point A to point B.
Yeah.
We don't usually stop and ask, why is point A called what it is?
Exactly. But looking at the stack of research we have for today, functional is probably the last word I would use to describe them. These names are messy, they're deeply political, and honestly, some of them are just bizarre.
Yeah.
It turns out that a street map isn't just about geography.
No, it's a historical document. It's a political manifesto. Sometimes it's a psychological profile of the city planners who died 200 years ago.
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We are going deep into the science and the drama of street naming. We've got a massive stack of articles, historical records, and urban planning notes here.
And our mission really is to decode the hidden language of the city.
Right.
And to start, we should probably dignify the topic with its proper technical name. We aren't just talking about street signs. This field of study is called odonymy.
Odonymy. It sounds a bit like a medical condition you don't want to tell your doctor about.
It does, doesn't it? It comes from the ancient Greek, hodos meaning road, and onoma meaning name. So quite literally, road naming.
Ah.
And while it sounds academic, it's actually one of the most accessible forms of archaeology we have. You don't need a shovel. You just need to look up.
So let's break down the anatomy of these things first, because on the surface it seems simple. You have a name and you have a type, main and street. But the notes here suggest that even that basic structure is full of traps.
It's full of marketing, actually. We break it down into two parts.
Yeah.
The specific, that's the unique identifier like Main or Broadway, and the generic, which is the classification, like street, avenue, or lane.
Okay.
The problem is the generic is often a total fabrication.
A fabrication? You mean like fake news on a pole?
In a way. Especially in the 19th century, and even more so today in real estate, developers use the generic to manipulate perception. If you call a street Park Avenue, you are evoking wealth, greenery, status.
Even if there's no park.
It doesn't matter if there isn't a single tree in sight and it's just a strip of concrete.
It's branding. You see Manor Lane on a map and you picture this winding country road with a hedge, not a cul-de-sac behind a big box store.
Precisely. It sets a price point before you even see the house. And historically, the grammar of these things used to be different too. If you look at British maps in the 1800s, you see this fascinating habit of hyphenating. It wasn't Broad Street as two words. It was Broad-Street, lower cases.
That feels so alien to read now. Broad Street. It turns the whole thing into a single compound noun.
Yeah, it changes the rhythm of how you say it. It shows how language evolves on the landscape. But if we want to get into the real stories, we have to look at the specifics. This is where we find what I like to call the ghosts of history.
This was my favorite part of the reading. The idea that a name can preserve a sensory experience from 500 years ago. We aren't just commemorating famous people, we're labeling what used to happen on that specific patch of dirt.
Exactly. In the modern world, we name streets after politicians or trees. But in the medieval world, naming was purely functional. It told you what you would find there. It was a warning, or an advertisement, or a direction.
The commerce and industry category is great for this. You have Haymarket in London. You don't need a degree to figure out what they were selling there.
Right. Or Cannery Row in Monterey. It's literal. But my favorite example, and one that really highlights how language drifts, is the Shambles. You see this street name in York and other old English cities?
See, when I use the word shambles today, I mean a disaster. Like, my kitchen is a shambles after making dinner.
And that definition is a direct result of the street name. Originally, the word comes from the Anglo-Saxon term "fleishshambles," which meant meat shelves.
Meat shelves. Okay, that took a turn.
The shambles was the butcher's district. These were the streets where raw meat was displayed on open shelves, directly onto the street. So the shambles were the stalls themselves.
Oh, wow.
And eventually, because of the blood, the guts, the chaos of a slaughterhouse district, the word shambles just morphed into meaning a complete mess.
That creates a very vivid and slightly gross picture. You walk down a quaint cobblestone tourist street in York today, but the name is basically screaming Slaughterhouse Avenue.
It's a sensory fossil, and you see it everywhere once you start translating. Smith Street, or La Rue des Forges. That's the sound of the hammer on the anvil. These are functional maps of a lost economy.
But then you have the ghosts that are a bit more literal. The names that commemorate things that were destroyed to make room for the street itself.
The landmarks that vanished. This is where Odonymy gets a bit grim. We have a habit of naming the grave after the victim.
Wall Street is the big one here, right?
The classic example. It's a metonym for global finance now. But originally, there was a literal wooden wall there to protect the Dutch settlers. The wall is long gone, but the name freezes that defensive perimeter in time.
And Canal Street in New York, there used to be a canal there. They filled it in and paved over it because it became a sewer.
Right. But I found the New Orleans counterexample really funny.
Me too.
New Orleans is great because it breaks the rule. They have a canal street too, but there was never a canal there.
It's a ghost of a ghost.
Essentially. The city reserved a massive right-of-way for a canal that they planned to dig. They never dug it. But the name Canal Street stuck. So in New York, you're driving on a grave. In New Orleans, you're driving on a broken promise.
That seems very on brand for urban planning. And speaking of New Orleans, we have to touch on the misconceptions. Bourbon Street.
Ah, yes. The assumption everyone makes. You go there, you drink a cocktail, you assume the street is named after the whiskey because that's what is happening all around you.
It fits the vibe perfectly. It's the party street.
It does, but the timeline is all wrong. The street was named in 1721. It's named after the House of Bourbon, the French royal dynasty.
No way.
Just like Burgundy Street isn't named after the wine, but the House of Burgundy.
So you have thousands of tourists stumbling around on Royal Dynasty Street thinking they are on Whiskey Road.
It's a beautiful example of how the current use of a street overwrites its original meaning in our minds. We project our own context onto the sign.
So we've talked about the organic, messy history, the butchers, the walls, the kings. But at some point, cities stopped growing organically and started being designed. And that's where we get the grids.
The shift from chaos to order. The grid is really an attempt to impose logic on the landscape.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., that logic is almost aggressively numerical.
It's utilitarian. But I saw a stat in the notes that confused me. The most common street name in the U.S. isn't First Street, it's Second Street.
Over 10,000 of them.
Which bothers me deeply. Where did all the first streets go?
They got promoted. First Street is usually the most important thoroughfare. It's the starting line. So over time, it gets renamed to Main Street, or Commerce Street, or Front Street if it's by the water, or it gets renamed after a local hero. Second Street is important enough to keep its number, but not important enough to get a fancy name.
So Second Street is the survivor. First Street sold out for the branding opportunities.
Exactly. But if you want to see a grid that really tries to be a computer code, you have to look at Washington, D.C.
D.C. feels like a puzzle. When you visit, you notice the letters, but then the letters stop.
It's an expanding algorithm. The architects, L'Enfant and Ellicott, designed it to grow. You start with lettered streets A, B, C. When you run out of letters, you move to two-syllable names. When you run out of those, three-syllable names.
And flowers and shrubs, right.
Then you move to names of flowers and shrubs. So if you're standing on Amaryllis Street, you know instantly that you are deep in the suburbs.
You know exactly how far from the center you are just by the syllable count, but D.C. has that famous glitch, the missing J.
Right.
There is no J Street. And I've heard urban legends about this, that the planner held a grudge against someone named J, or John J.
It's much more practical and honestly a bit more boring. In 18th century typography and handwriting, the letters I and J were often...
They all look the same.
Exactly. They were basically interchangeable. The planners were worried that I Street and J Street would be confused on maps and mail, so they just deleted J.
It's a typo prevention strategy that became permanent geography. Imagine being the letter J and just getting canceled by a city.
And then you look at Salt Lake City, and the grid becomes theological.
This is the coordinate system, right? The addresses look like math equations. 4570 south, 4000 west.
It is a math equation. The entire city is plotted on a grid centered on the LDS temple. That address tells you that you are exactly 45 blocks south and 40 blocks west of the temple.
It literally places the church at the center of your existence.
It does. It's brilliant for navigation, but it lacks a certain romance. Meet me at 400 South doesn't have the same ring as meet me at the corner of Spruce and Walnut.
Which brings us to themes. When planners get tired of numbers, they turn to themes to create an identity. Philadelphia was the pioneer here. William Penn laid out the city with tree names: walnut, locust, spruce, pine.
Which every suburb in America has copied since.
Totally.
It projects a specific image, natural, sturdy, everlasting.
Yeah.
But you see much more niche themes, too. Gander, Newfoundland, is famous for its aviation history, so every single street is named after a pilot.
Or the Welsh streets in Liverpool. Ringo Starr grew up there. It creates a microculture.
It does. But my favorite anomaly in the grid world has to be Tucson, Arizona. They have streets, they have avenues, and then they have stravanews.
Stravanews? I assumed that was a typo in the notes.
It is a real postal recognized designation. It's for diagonal roads that cut across the grid.
Right.
It's a portmanteau of street and avenue.
I want to live on a Stravanue. It sounds like you're living in the future.
It shows that even within rigid systems, local quirks emerge. But, and this is the heavy pivot, controlling the names on the map isn't just about navigation or whimsy. It is about power.
This is the politics of renaming. And I think this is the part of the deep dive that really hits home, because when a government falls or a movement rises, the street signs are usually the first thing to change.
Absolutely. It is the cheapest and most visible way to signal a regime change. You are literally rewriting the landscape. If you control the street names, you control the public memory.
We saw this play out in real time in Zimbabwe.
Yes. After independence in 1980, there was a massive purge of colonial names. Roads named after British generals and royalty became roads named after Zimbabwean nationalist leaders. It's a way of saying this land is ours now.
And it happens everywhere. Ukraine in 2014 is a huge example.
The decommunization laws. They stripped away Soviet names. There was a street in Kyiv named after Patrice Lumumba, a Congolese independence leader, but one heavily supported by the USSR. They renamed it after Pope John Paul II.
Wow.
I mean, think about the ideological shift there, from African Marxism to Polish Catholicism in one sign change.
It's dizzying. And in Romania, after 1989, you saw the same thing. But the data there was interesting. It wasn't uniform.
No, and that's the nuance. In Bucharest, only about 6% of streets were renamed. But in Timisoara, where the revolution started, it was 26%. The intensity of the renaming reflected the intensity of the struggle in that city.
It's not just about politics, though. Sometimes it's about trauma. Erasing a name because it hurts to say it.
The Malbone Street example in Brooklyn is chilling. In 1918, there was a horrific train crash, the Malbone Street wreck. Nearly 100 people died. The name became synonymous with death.
You couldn't sell a house on Malbone Street.
So they rebranded. They changed it to Empire Boulevard. It sounds grand, triumphant. It washes away the blood.
We see that with Hamburg Avenue becoming Wilson Avenue during World War I. We didn't want to be reminded of the enemy.
But sometimes the renaming's an apology. Look at Wong Wei in Riverside, California.
Wong Wei. That feels uncomfortable. It sounds like a bad pun.
It was almost certainly a slur, or at least highly insensitive, marking the Chinatown area. Years later, the city realized the implication. They renamed it Wong Street, and they added the Chinese characters to the sign. It turned a mockery into a mark of respect.
That brings up the dead person rule, because naming something after a person is risky. We love to hero worship, but heroes are human. They can disappoint us.
That is why most cities have a mandatory waiting period. The general rule is, don't name a street after someone until they are safely dead and can't embarrass you.
San Francisco learned this the hard way with Lech Walesa.
They did. They named a street after the Polish leader when he was a global hero, Nobel Prize winner, everything. Then, years later, he made some very public, very anti-gay remarks. For a city like San Francisco, that was a deal breaker.
So they had to unname it.
They renamed it Dr. Tom Waddle Place in 2014. It's embarrassing for a city to backtrack. It's why you rarely see streets named after living presidents. The risk is just too high.
Except for poets, apparently.
Well, yes. San Francisco did break their own rule for the poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti. They named an alley after him while he was still alive.
Poets are generally safer bets than politicians. There is one more layer to this power struggle, and that's language itself. Not just who the street is named after, but what language the sign is in.
Language on signs is a flag planting. Look at Brussels. It's a bilingual city, French and Dutch. Every street has two names. But they aren't always translations. Sometimes they are arguments.
How so?
Well, sometimes it's literal. Bergstraat becomes a Rue de la Montagne, Mountain Street. Simple. But look at the boulevard named after Charlemagne. In French, it's Boulevard Charlemagne. In Dutch, it used to be Carlemangelen.
Oh.
But they changed it to Karel de Grooteland, Charles the Great.
That seems subtle.
It's incredibly pointed. They are rejecting the French version of the name and asserting the Dutch cultural ownership of the historical figure. It's a linguistic tug-of-war played out on metal poles.
You see that in Quebec, too. The Gallicization of the streets.
Lakeshore Road wasn't French enough. It became Chemin Lakeshore. But even that was too franglais. The pressure was to change it to Chemin du Bord du Lac. It's about telling the resident, you are in French territory now.
It's fascinating. We think of street names as permanent, but they are actually incredibly fluid.
Which leads us to the places where the system breaks down completely. The anomalies.
I love this section. Because for all our grids and politics, sometimes the world just refuses to be labeled. There are places with no names.
There are. In the Netherlands, there is a district called Grandvoorvisch. They decided street names were unnecessary. They just have house numbers.
Just numbers.
But they start at 13,000. So your address is just 13,005 Grandvoorvisch.
That sounds like living in a giant filing cabinet. It's so impersonal.
Contrast that with Costa Rica. For a long time, and still in many places, streets didn't have names at all. Directions are entirely relational.
This is the turn left at the big mango tree system.
Literally. An official address might be from the old church, 100 meters south, house with the blue gate.
But what happens if they paint the gate red? Or cut down the tree?
Then you get lost. But notice the unit of measurement. They say 100 meters, but they really mean one block. It doesn't matter if the block is 50 meters or 200 meters long. 100 meters is just slang for next corner.
It forces you to interact with people. You can't just follow a blue dot on a screen. You have to ask a local where the old church used to be.
It creates a high-context society. You have to know the history to find your way home.
On the flip side of no names, you have the cities that have too many of the same name. Atlanta. I'm looking at you.
The Peachtree problem.
It's a comedy of errors. Peachtree Street, Peachtree Drive, Peachtree Plaza, Peachtree Circle.
Peachtree Way, Peachtree Walk, West Peachtree. There are dozens of them. It defeats the entire purpose of a name, which is to be a unique identifier.
If you tell someone, meet me on Peachtree, you might never see them again.
It's chaos. Philadelphia has a similar issue on the main line with Gulf Road. You have Upper Gulf, Lower Gulf, Old Gulf, New Gulf. And the best part, they intersect each other.
It's a maze. It feels like the city planners just gave up and hit copy-paste.
And when the official names fail us, or are just too long, we see the final layer of naming, the nicknames, the user-generated content.
The shorthand.
Right. In Chicago, nobody says Lakeshore Drive. It's LSD.
Which gives the commute a very different psychedelic vibe.
In Williamsburg, the Duke of Gloucester Street is a mouthful, so locals call it Dog Street.
It's a way of reclaiming the city, isn't it? The planners can put whatever they want on the sign, but we live here, so we'll call it what we want.
It adds intimacy. It separates the locals from the tourists. If you say the Oz in Seattle, everyone knows you mean University Way. It's a shibboleth.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the butcher shops of medieval England to the number grids of Salt Lake to the political battlegrounds of Ukraine. What's the big takeaway? When I look at that sign on the corner tomorrow, what should I be seeing?
I think you should see a fossil. A street sign freezes a specific moment in time, what that society valued, who was in power, or what building just burned down. When you look at a map, you aren't just looking at geography. You are reading a history book written on metal poles.
That's a powerful image. It turns a commute into a history lesson.
It does, but it also raises a question that I've been thinking about, especially regarding new developments.
What's that?
If street names are fossils of what a society values, look at what we are building today. Look at the new suburbs.
Whispering Pines, Serenity Way, Falcon Ridge.
Exactly. We call these fantasy names. They're marketing terms. They are chosen specifically to be inoffensive, soothing, and distinct from the urban chaos. Nobody's naming a street the Shambles anymore.
It's all very beige.
So my final thought for you, to the listener, is this. If historians in 100 years look at our maps to figure out what was important to us, what will they find? Will they see our heroes and our history? Or will they just see a blank, generic map of pleasant valleys? Are we erasing our own identity by trying to be too safe?
That is a haunting thought. We might be leaving behind a map that says absolutely nothing about who we were.
A map of ghosts without names.
Well, on that cheerful note, thank you for guiding us through the streets today. I'm definitely going to take the long way home and read some signs.
Watch out for the Strava news.
Will do. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Check your signs, people. You never know what you might find.